Welcome to the Mindful CIO Podcast, where we explore the human side of tech leadership and what it takes to mindfully and sustainably lead high-performing tech teams. In this episode 1 of the Mindful CIO Podcast, I spoke with Andrew Ogbourne, IT advisor, interim CIO, and not-for-profit director. We started a conversation discussing topics like emotional intelligence and neurodiversity. Andrew spoke about the benefits of establishing long-term quality and satisfying working relationships and the upsides of fostering a positive workplace environment. Andrew then shared how his daily mindfulness meditation practice has helped him to increase self and others' awareness and to exude calmness and confidence under pressure. We explore the key traits of inspiring leaders, and Andrew shared his experience and stories about leading change, how to fiercely prioritize, and the negative impact of unrealistic backlogs to team morale and talent retention. We close the conversation with Andrew sharing his perspective on being okay with not knowing it all, embracing uncertainty, and leading by example with vulnerability and humility. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. Welcome, Andrew. Thanks so much for joining us today and being the very first guest of the Mindful CIO podcast.
Thank you, Natalie. I'm very glad to be here. It's exciting, isn't it?
It is. So I'll start reading your official bio, Andrew, and then we'll move to our conversation. So Andrew is a respected IT leader with extensive experience working in interim and permanent IT leadership roles, and as an IT advisor from IT advisor to CXOs. Andrew's specific expertise includes IT platform and cloud strategy, IT operating model transformation, and enabling organizational agility through contemporary portfolio management. He has an extensive record of helping organizations to design and deliver successful programs involving digital, data, and technology enabling in the professional service, financial service, publishing, medical research, and community services sector. However, Andrew's passion lies in understanding people and organizations doing work with social purpose and helping them to grasp the complex opportunities and challenges that contemporary technology offers. Today, he helps for-purpose organizations develop and implement the IT-enabled strategies, understand and manage technology-related risks, and position the IT and wider teams to respond to contemporary technology opportunities. Finally, Andrew serves as a deputy chair of the board at Tenants Victoria, the state's leading organization providing assistance and advocacy for renters with the aim of helping to achieving a safe, secure, and affordable home for renters in a fair housing system here in Victoria. So, Andrew, that's what your official polished bio says on your LinkedIn and everything. Now, we've met, I was actually as part of my research, going through my LinkedIn, and it's been over 4 years that we met, actually. Yeah. Yes. So, it would be great to hear from you, your version of, what do you think that listeners maybe would like to know about Andrew Ogbourne, and how did you get here?
Well, that's, I had I studied physics and maths, and I had a technology career to start with. I was a programmer and then a database administrator with Oracle, and worked for myself for a while and did those technical things. And then I got a job as a manager at a publishing company, a legal publishing company, which was, technology heavy, but that gave me my first chance to lead a little team of people in getting something important done, which was about turning all of those big legal volumes that you see behind lawyers who are interviewed on the news occasionally into CD publications. And that was an exciting thing to do, but it involved change in the organisation, and it involved leading a group of people who might be used to typesetting to move more towards technology implementation. And I enjoyed that, and I did quite well at it, I think. And I had a few other organisational leadership roles, including in workers' compensation insurance, and again, leading some pretty big change. That was a bigger thing in the way technology works in supporting a 1,000+ person organisation. Again, technology was what we were delivering to the organisation, but it wasn't the point. It's an enabling thing. And getting people to understand what it is we're trying to do for our customers and orient their thinking and their communication towards that, solving that problem was really what I was about and what I enjoyed, and understanding better about change management, the formalities of it as well as the psychology of it, and how that connects to project management and portfolio management, and how that connects to the leadership of the people who are closest to you and the wider organisation is, again, something I found that I enjoyed. I've then done a lot of consulting, with big consulting companies, and now I work for myself, advising mostly non-profits in the community sector, because I think, at this stage I want to do something that I believe in the purpose of the client and the organisation as well. But again, the theme is, yes, I know about technology because I've done it for so many years now, but it's really not the point. Influencing people at the board level and executive colleagues and people throughout the organisation, the technologists, and also external partners, service providers and so on, is really what I enjoy doing. Understanding them and their motivations, and I was going to say using that to influence, but that sounds quite manipulative. That's not really what I mean. But understanding them and through that, creating that sort of a sustainable, inspiring work environment that gets important things done.
Beautiful. So many things you mentioned that I wanted to drill down, but at least highlight. We might not be able to drill down everything. So you mentioned change a number of times, right? And I think, as leaders in the IT space, leading change is one of the key aspects of tech executives. And you mentioned the formalities and the psychology of change. And I was actually looking at your profile. You're certifying Proficiency, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's a few years ago now, but I keep it straight I keep it in my head, and I refer back to it and the people who influenced me in helping me understand that years ago. Some of my most valued colleagues are change managers, because it's such a strong partnership between IT leaders and change managers.
Yeah, and so often overlooked as well. And we see it quite often, project and systems that go live, but if changes are done properly, adoption, it's questionable, right? And that could be a very expensive exercise to neglect, I guess, the change piece. And you mentioned, technology as an enabler, that is the focus on people and influencing and sustainably as well. And the fact that you have worked for some, when we met, I think you were with Make-A-Wish Foundation back then. Yeah.
That was one of my interim IT lead roles. I was working with Make-A-Wish for a few months there, and I've also done some work with Murdoch Children's Research Institute in a kind of a program leadership role to do with their data systems. Publishers, as I mentioned, workers' compensation insurance, and at the moment my client they're a large operator of early years education centres and really starting to build their organisation and IT pretty well from scratch, from no people to 1,000 or 1,500 educators in over 18 months. And that's a fascinating and interesting challenge, because you get to build an IT organisation and partnerships and systems from the ground up. I say build. Of course, we've got no developers. I don't mean actually build. It's build the ecosystem around enabling childcare, where you can take your kids before and after school care and the kindergarten, and that's a lovely thing to be involved with too.
Yeah, so there's a bit of a theme there with the Catholic schools now, and the Murdoch's Children's Hospital and the Make-A-Wish Foundation. For those listening who are not familiar, Make-A-Wish Foundation is a not-for-profit working with children experiencing critical illness and supporting them and their families. But you also worked with the big ones like Deloitte, and now being self-employed. So it's a bit of a different space to be, isn't it, Andrew?
Managing my own time. I'm really enjoying that. I mean, you have to be ready for a bit of the ups and downs when you're CEO of a corporation of one. I saw somebody refer to it as the other day, and that's true. But if you've got once you build a decent amount of experience and network and contacts, and you can find some of your own work, and it's a really fulfilling way to operate. You develop strong relationships in your network and with the people that you work with. But I'm quite deliberate in the way I work as an advisor and as an interim. So I'm not there as a try before you buy executive, and it's a different way of thinking about, we're getting into the how does interim leadership work, but while we're there, let's touch on it for a minute. I think it's really important to know that you're there as an interim to get something done, and then you'll go. I sort of thought, well, I'll be there as an interim and maybe I'll position myself for a full-time role. And you're doing a completely different thing in that case. You're sort of a 6-month interview, and you're making decisions and you're influencing in a different way than you will if you know that, no, I have to establish this and set you on your own 2 feet to operate by yourself. And I think the latter is more powerful. Maybe it's just because I've got a short span of attention, and by 12 or 18 months, I'm ready to go and solve different problems with different people. But anyway, that works for me.
Yeah, on a mission, right?
Yeah, that's right.
On a mission.
Right.
Cool. Okay, so maybe let's switch gears. So thanks so much for sharing, Andrew. And I'm sure we'll get back to further nuances of your journey so far. So looking into the Mindful CIO Manifesto, which is what originated the Mindful CIO community, which actually led us to kick off the Mindful CIO podcast in the first place. So looking at the Mindful CIO Manifesto, Andrew, 1.0 or 2.0, which aspects or which declarations or principles do you relate the most with, and why, if any?
Well, it's the package, of course. Diversity and humanity and sustainability and healthy culture and human skills and focus and presence. All of those things have to be together. But since you ask, I really think the human skills over technical prowess is the way it's phrased there. Let me get back to that. But the human skills and emotional intelligence enable us to consider and respond to all of the other factors, of course. We've got to understand ourselves and each other before we can respond to the different circumstances and personalities that are around us, so that we can influence and get things done. If I've got a team of people, I need to understand a little bit about what's going on in their world and their lives and their motivations to help them succeed in order for us to succeed overall. And yes, I can, develop a program plan, and we shall have a Gantt chart, and it'll have KPIs, and even it'll have OKRs in our organisation and what have you. And that's fine, and it's probably necessary sometimes more than others, but unless I understand where the people are at and what they're thinking, what success looks like for them, then it's hard to get much done on paper. And I would say that the human skills with technical prowess, but the over word there emphasises the fact that, there's maybe a stereotype, which I don't want to reinforce, but there's a bit of strength in it, that IT people sometimes value and develop technical skills in preference to, people skills or, emotional intelligence. It's just, we're not all like that. I'm not necessarily like that, even though I started as a programmer, but there are some people like that. And I think even one of the things that attracted me to the whole Mindful CIO conversation was, let's acknowledge that and let's figure out what do we do to help IT leaders who are leaders of an organisation of people trying to get something done using technology for their organisation and for their clients. Let's help those IT leaders develop those people skills that for some people are not their natural first go-to, toolkit. And I think this human skills over technical prowess thing talks to all of those themes, which leads to everything else.
Super, agree. Of course, I'm biased, totally biased. So we brought this together. So a couple of things you mentioned there, Andrew, that I'd like to comment. So your point on understanding your people, you can put a Gantt chart, in the program design and everything. But if you don't get to know your people, it can be really, challenging to get the results you're after. And this is so aligned with 21st century leadership, right? We talk about the research shows that leaders who actually have developed awareness of their people, they actually know that people in their team members in a personal level, they can get a discretionary effort. Not that you're doing that to get the discretionary effort, but people who go above and beyond if they know that you care as a leader. So instead of getting the compliance, you get the real commitment, and then you can get people to be, fully committed to deliver above and beyond. So just re-emphasizing what you said there before.
Yeah, I think that's right. And maybe I could touch on a couple of the points there. This understanding them in order to get the discretionary effort and performance. Yes, that's right. I agree with that.
That's not the goal, though.
It's not, but it's not the goal. Yes. And I know that's not what you mean. But I think there's a value in understanding each other and having a bit of a care factor so that we develop a positive relationship and environment to work in as a goal in and of itself. Even if we've made no difference to the outputs we achieved as an organisation, I think there's some value in doing that because it makes our lives more enjoyable, and the amount of time we spend at work and with our work colleagues, that's worth doing by itself. Now, by the way, that helps us, achieve more, or at least creative things with our colleagues than we would otherwise. But that's by the way. The other thing I just want to mention there is that, yes, emphasising and understanding human skills for ourselves and then coaching and helping others develop them is really important. But it's worthwhile acknowledging, understanding that there are some of the people who work with you who will work best if they have a Gantt chart and a really clear set of, specific technical objectives, and their job is to get these technical things done. We don't all have to become professional change managers or psychologists. That's part of the understanding and understanding where you place the right work with the right people and communicate with them at their level. It's part of the awareness is understanding, and not everybody has to become like you.
100%. So back to your point before, win-win, high performance and a positive culture where we are actually all happy, thriving, and actually happy to be at work. And diversity, I think your point there, what comes to my mind is diversity,
Right.
Yes, neurodiversity, as well. It's another element of diversity, not just gender diversity, which is often the focus when we talk about diversity, but neurodiversity. Yes, some people, the preference is focused on the technical path. Really, when I was a solution architect back in my management consulting days, I was very happy as a solution architect. I didn't really want to lead, back then. So, I think we have many people really keen to focus on that technical career path, and they don't need to develop emotional intelligence. However, the good news is that different than IQ, as we know, EQ can be developed. So for those who are interested, it is possible. And as you said, although the tech space tends to attract people which are not necessarily, emotional intelligence is a strength, it is possible to develop that.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So thanks for that, Andrew. So in terms of, we spoke about healthy culture and, having a good experience at work. In terms of self-care, do you have any kind of, rituals or routines, something that you do kind of regular-ish, or a toolbox of things that you pick and choose depending on what's going on? How do you look after yourself, Andrew? Because and positioning that, I think it's important, of course, to be able to look after a team and deliver results. We need to look after ourselves in the first place. So how do you do that? Yeah,
that's right. Well, look, for me, and this has been the work of decades to figure this out. For me, it's mindfulness meditation is a good starting point and a good grounding point for me. I mean, it's not the thing that I started with. I'll get back to that, but I've developed a pretty good habit of meditating almost every day, only for 10 or 15 minutes or something in the morning, sometimes in the evening. But it helps me to observe, firstly, what's going on in my head, in my environment, in my day, so that I can decide what to do with that, rather than just being kind of unconsciously led by whatever's going on in my brain that I don't even notice. It allows me to see it and decide. I mean, decide sounds a bit kind of deterministic, as if that always works. No, of course, it doesn't always work, but at least you're, observing. And then that allows me a little bit to observe the people around me and the way that I'm interacting with them purposefully and mindfully, and so you can adjust a little bit. So that's helped me become more aware. And then, of course, once you become more aware, you can start to accept and have a bit of compassion about yourself and your actions and what have you. That's been a sort of a next step of both of yourself and of your situation and others around you. You start to sort of, once you sort of observe and accept and have some compassion about what's going on in your own mind, that acceptance and compassion floats out a little bit into your understanding of the people around you. And I think what that's helped me to do is just think and act, and maybe it's just appear a bit more calm about what's going on, even though there's a lot going on in my brain and I'm, moving things and what have you. It probably seems less chaotic, and it probably is less chaotic, really. That just allows me to be a bit, more centered person. It helps confidence in not only myself, but the people around me about what I'm doing. Now, of course, the other things are I garden, I get in nature. And I actually organise a community garden in the old Pentridge prison in Coburg in the north of Melbourne. And those things, it's the community aspect of it in things that have got nothing to do with my work, but it's also just getting your hand in the soil and growing food, which is utterly disconnected to anything that I do in my professional life. So it's a thing it's a cliche almost these days for people to find the thing that you can focus and be in the zone on. And that's probably what it is for me. There's some things, I don't know, sometimes those things work, sometimes they don't work. I don't want to make it out as if I've figured it out, the answer, and that is the answer for me and it always works. Those things help me.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for sharing, Andrew. And maybe going back to the gardening, I think that's how we found out that we're actually quite close, right, in terms of location. We're nearly neighbors through the, your mention of the community garden in Moreland, which is now my council in Melbourne as well. So nature, I think, garden, and it's, clearly very therapeutic now to have your hands now in the soil and all of that going on. So you mentioned calmness and that confidence, not that you are perfectly calm, but there is that sense of calmness. And when we chat the other day, you mentioned that people perceive, or there was a feedback from someone saying that they feel...
Yeah, I've noticed that a couple of times lately, and I was a bit surprised that they say you've got a calmness under pressure that inspires confidence, because I wouldn't have seen that necessarily, but I've thought about it a little bit since then, and I think I have. Partly it's just a professional skill you learn. As a leader, you can't be, looking like you're panicking when there's a crisis going on. You've got to project a bit of calmness. But it's a little bit of that. But I think it's mainly that you're spending time understanding what's going on in your head and your world, and you're accepting that a little bit, and that means you're feeling a little bit more in control. Even if you're not in control, you're in control at least of yourself and your interactions, and maybe that's where it comes from. I don't know.
Knowing that you can handle whatever life throws on you. I guess we were talking the other day.
I mean, part of that comes from a 30-year career of 30-something more year career of doing this. Somebody, a consultant, said to me once that they've learned, that every project or every client that they work with, you come into it and you've got no idea what's going on, and it's often pretty daunting and scary and overwhelming, and so. And after a while, you learn not that you've figured out the answers to all the questions that will be thrown at you, because the next client will be just as unknown and just as overwhelming. But you've learned that you'll figure it out through, and so that gives you a level of confidence and calmness, just that ability to, influence people and technology and yourself to find the solution. Well, it will see you through, and I think I understand that now.
Which comes with experience, of course, Andrew.
Yeah.
And that's practice, that personal practice as well, I suppose. So before we move on, I just want to comment. You mentioned that developing that self-acceptance and compassion towards yourself, that tends to flow. And that's very aligned with some reading and research that I've done recently with around self-compassion and the work from Kristin Neff. I don't know if you're familiar with Kristin Neff.
No.
So, yeah, I don't know if you have any comments, because I think that's such an important point. The more you accept yourself and you have compassion towards yourself, more you become more, not just tolerant, but empathetic to others. And empathy is such an important quality in leadership as well.
Yeah, I've been observing that lately, that by spending time understanding and accepting what's going on for myself, and when I'm interacting with others, they're interacting with you in certain ways. That, some ways that you might find, productive and energetic and positive, and others that you find, difficult or frustrating or confusing. And I think once you've spent a bit of time understanding your own reactions and what's going on in your own brain and your own world, you start to, you don't know what's going on in their heads and their world, but you start to have an understanding that there is stuff going on, and that I don't know what this is. I feel like this might be a bit of pop psychology, because I'm not a psychologist at all, but it's just experience helping me just be patient, perhaps, and be present with, and then to try different kind of approaches without kind of getting into the, why is that person being so difficult? They're a difficult person. And then when you've labelled them as a difficult person, then your next interaction with them is bound to be difficult, isn't it?
And it becomes a cycle, because your reaction will feed that, and so on. Yeah, that judgmental.
Maybe what it is, it's helping to cut that cycle, because you're not going into it with a judgment about them. That person's a difficult person, or this situation is going to be difficult. You just sort of, well, I don't know what's happening with them, and I'll talk to them and I'll try to understand them, and we'll try and find a path that which is successful for them and successful also for what we want to do as a team. So, I don't know that I can analyze it any more than that, really.
No, that's awesome. Thanks so much, Andrew. And I think that's clearly working, right? Something that I noticed in your LinkedIn profile, not that I was looking for it, but I noticed how many recommendations I have, nearly 20 recommendations. I think that's a reflection of, people showing love, sharing how they feel about work. Of course, I haven't gone through, but it's not everyone that would have that number of recommendations and testimonies from people that voluntarily, saying, how awesome it is to work with you. But anyhow, I don't want to put you in a...
No, but what it triggers for me is that the things that I have found most satisfying in my career is the relationships I've had with people that I've worked tightly with, and they've got something out of it and I've got something out of it, and together we've done something really important. And I think what you're observing there just says there's a number of those quality relationships that I've been lucky enough to find over the years, and I've made a point of noticing it, I suppose, and then building on that, because I know that's where we're most successful together, rather than, yes, there's been some big projects and some big organisations, but actually I kind of think, well, so what? It's the influences on me and each other that I think has made for an enriching experience. And I get back to something, what we were talking about earlier, where there's value in developing those positive working environments. and relationships for its own sake.
100%. 100%. Andrew, on the topic of relationships, if I asked you, who are the leaders, or maybe it could be a public figure or someone that you have worked with that you kind of admire, not necessarily be a role model, but someone that you go like, yeah, no, this person have the qualities that inspires me and I like to develop myself, or maybe a role model if you do have a leadership role model for you.
Yeah, I don't know that I would name any one particular person, because when you ask me that question, what I think of is that situations and experiences and particular attributes that I've, found in a number of leaders over a period of time. I think of a leader that when I was a young manager in the publishing industry, he was a publishing executive, I suppose, not an IT person at all. And his leadership style was to be. He communicated well. He and I understood each other. He didn't try to do my job, and I didn't try to do his job. He respected the work that I was trying to do, but also supported me in the things that I was uncertain of which there were plenty. And he didn't feel that his job was to work out the answer to the question and give it to me, but to support me in figuring out what the right path was. And then, sometimes it didn't turn out to be the right path, and support me through that as well. So there's a level of respect, and there's a level of empowerment, and a level of support in whatever the outcome is to some degree that I found really empowering and inspiring. So that's one sort of experience that I had. And another was when I worked in a really big organisation. The IT department line was 1,500 people once, and there was a lot of inspiring leaders in that organisation, but one in particular who was sort of a senior exec in IT who, again, developed clear sort of leadership structures where and the theme I think that I got out of that was each manager didn't need to know about or didn't need to be able to do the job of all of the people in his or her department. It was a different level of leadership, leading the outcomes and the kind of interfaces between the people and the business systems that we were operating in, developing those business systems so the people further down could operate them and get important things done. Understanding those levels of leadership was, again, a big learning for me. And so, again, some of those relationships I retain many years later, which I find really satisfying.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. So on that note, looking back into, situations, organizations that you have worked with, projects, what stories comes to mind, if any, around the non-technical aspects of leadership? So, in the chat we had before, I mentioned some of the potential themes that actually comes up with executive coaching clients are often one that you mentioned already, leading change, the challenge of, guiding the team, through the change journey, or getting the buy-in from the board and influencing, which is something that you touched upon already. Sometimes competing priorities, just managing those stakeholders, the multiple stakeholders and competing priorities, and also talent, attracting talent, retaining talent, developing talent. So any story comes to mind in terms of the non-technical aspects of leading in the tech space, Andrew, that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Yeah, sure. I can think of a couple of examples and things that I think might be useful to touch on. One is about organisational change. I've had the opportunity to lead a couple of pretty big organisational changes in the way IT runs, and what we insource and what we outsource, and what people's roles are and what the structures will be, and therefore what the IT systems and services will deliver are. And of course, I've been subject to some and I use that word deliberately, subject to some big organizational changes that, that you feel powerless in that situation sometimes. You feel like, well, I'm waiting to see what's going to be done to me. So let me start there. And that's a experience that is, really difficult. It's not get away from it. It's really difficult, and it makes you feel powerless, and you lose agency for a while there until you decide to take that agency back and say, okay, well, I'm going to accept a new reality and a new situation, and I'm going to decide what I'm going to do with it. Operate in this new environment I'm in now, or decide to go and work in some other environment, or but taking on that agency is what helped me end up in a positive place to figure out what I wanted to do next in my career. And so learning from that, when I've had to lead change, first of all, I mean, I don't want to recite the books about, change leadership and the things that you should do, but probably the point that I would make is that you can't decide in a practical and technical sense what the steps you want to take are and what the outcomes you want, and where this bit of the organisation is going to go and what new system you're going to implement and who's going to need to use it, and then say, well, now let's get a change manager to make sure that everybody feels good about that. That's not maybe that's painting lipstick on a pig, or that's a terrible way to go about it. As a leader, getting anything done, you are the leader of the change. You might need to bring in, an enterprise architect, and you might need some business analysis expertise, and you might need some, some technical skills, and you might need external systems or whatever, but you also need some capability about leading that change to get that done. So I suppose what I'm waffling about here is leadership of the change in the way people think and feel before, during, and after a period of instability is integral, central, first almost in the leadership that you have to bring to making that change successful. So change integral and first as part of leading any change. I guess, I mean, the clue is in the language. You're leading a change. It's not a technical thing. It's not an organizational thing. It's a change in the way you want people to think and feel and operate. And so that's what you've got to try and get done. And that will be successful if, I was going to say all, maybe that's unrealistic, but a large portion of the people feel that they can succeed and they can achieve something that's positive for their career and their lives through this experience. And so if you can't paint that picture for them, I mean, you can help, but if you can help them want to paint that picture for themselves and then figure out what that future is, and then empower them to grasp that future, then maybe you're onto something.
Love that, Andrew. Thank you. And I think the takeaway for me is and probably, sorry if I'm simplifying, but what comes to mind is what's in it for me. And that's something that if we can articulate and help people to see, not articulate on their behalf, because as you said, it's hard for people. And that's what it wasn't clear for you in your first part of the story, where you had an experience where you were subject to change. You had felt powerless, no agency. And that sounds like inspired you to do change, to lead change.
Maybe that's true.
I don't know if you saw the link, but that's the link that I saw clearly there.
Maybe I didn't realise the link, but I think you're probably right. There is a bit of that in it. And that what's in it for me thing that is often used, yes, and you do have to help people figure out what's in it for me, but it's sometimes I've seen leaders or even change managers try and write that down, give people the answer to that question. But I don't think that's possible, really. You have to, paint some possible futures maybe, and then help and empower the people who are in it to figure out what they want to get out of this
themselves.
For themselves.
Giving
and that's scary for people. And for, some people are not, up for taking that autonomy, so therein you've got to help them have enough confidence, or psychological safety is another phrase that's used there, to know that, well, it's okay, or maybe it's confidence in themselves or something. But getting people to take that agency, I suppose, is one of the hardest things if your culture, or if their current reality is that they don't, if they're passive.
And also it depends on the quality of the relationship they have with you, which goes back to your point before of developing awareness of yourself, awareness of others, knowing your people, and developing those closer, healthy relationships as well. So people are comfortable enough, safe enough to open up and so on. All right, I'm conscious of time. And so what other stories do you have in mind that you'd like to share, Andrew, if any, in relation to non-technical leadership challenges in your life story, in your career story?
One more that's been a theme that I think is relevant to this. It's a little bit more in the realm of how do we get things done, not technically, but project and program leadership. And it's about prioritization, and it's about program portfolio management, I suppose. How do we figure out which things to get done? Because, everybody's busy, and there's always a tendency there's always lots of ideas about new things we could do. Whether you're in a startup, or a startup that's starting to get to scale, or whether you're in a well-established organization, there's a million things that we can do. And when we add one thing to the wish list at the sort of inbound end, at the ideas end of the organisation, if I can put it that way, we think we've got something done. Well, we haven't got anything done if the wish list is already totally full. And so helping organisations to figure out what are the right things to do at a strategic level over many years that influence the whole organisation, and scaling right down to what should we change in this team this week or in this product, is something that I've spent quite a bit of time working on. And a few aspects of that, first of all, understanding who the customer is of what you're getting done. And it might be the customer or the organisation, but who's going to benefit from what it is you're doing. But in the end, it's a group of people who are deciding on a bunch of things to do. And prioritising what those things are means deciding which good things not to do. And be it, a strategic planning session by executives, or be it a team backlog grooming session, if you like. I always say to people, well, look, tell me which things that are great ideas that you would like to do, but you're deciding not to do, or at least yet. And if they haven't identified any, they haven't prioritised. So let's go back and do it again. Now, of course, none of those things are set in stone, and you've got to keep doing it, but you've got to keep being in the habit of prioritising fiercely to get focus. Because when you get focus in a team or organisation, these are the three things that for the next month or 3 months or whatever we're going to focus on getting done. That gives people permission to say, no, I'm not going to do that, because these are the things we're focusing on, and get some satisfaction around working with each other to say, Natalie, is that really going to help us get one of these three things done, or is that about one of those other things?
For me, it's managing distraction, which is back to mindfulness. I even took a deep breath, just listening to you, having top three things to focus on, give us clarity and ability to manage the distractions better.
Yeah, I think that's right. So that's been a theme, and developing techniques to help organisations do that. Connecting to the experience and the success of their people has been another big. It's a mechanical thing, but I'm bringing it up because it has such an impact on the extent to which people feel successful, or overwhelmed or just frustrated because they're always doing one of 100 things on any given day. It has a big impact on your ability to inspire and lead. And when we come to sustainability and, you know, attracting and retaining talent, this question of, do people feel empowered and successful, and do they feel they're getting something useful done? A lot of it is to do with the way you're interacting with them, but it's also to do with how many things you're asking them to get done. If you're asking them to get done 1,000 things this month and they feel they've got 5 things done, and that leaves, you know, 995 that are undone, that's overwhelming and frustrating for anybody. And if you say, well, let's focus on these 6, then, well, they've achieved something powerful.
And almost, I don't know, probably a very strong word here, but almost demoralizing, having such a large backlog, and I only managed to do 1% versus these are the 3 things that we agreed. And look at me, I managed to help to progress with those top 3. Yeah, absolutely. The sense of achievement, and back to positive psychology, you know, Martin Salomon says, sense of achievement is one of the 5 pillars of well-being. So back to your point, yes.
And combined with the fact that if we're trying to do 5 things and we're focusing on those 5 things and we're not switching all the time, we'll get a lot more done than if we've got 100 things and we're trying to switch between them all the time. We will not get as much done. Just as a purely kind of productivity thing, you know, you've got to focus, and that means you've got to identify the good ideas that you're not going to do.
Absolutely, yeah. So firefighting is not fun for anyone. So be firefighting, and switch tasking, because multitasking is a myth. So switch tasking is also counterproductive, as we know. Yes. Wonderful, Andrew. So I think it's time to nearly wrap up, and maybe if we could close with your, you know, top 3 tips or success strategies to leading mindfully and sustainably high performance tech teams. What comes to mind when I ask you that question? What are your top 3 strategies or top 3 tips, if there is, you know, such a thing? I imagine that you have way more than 3, but if you had to narrow down, what are the 3 that come to mind?
Well, okay. One is, of course, back to the theme of this kind of talk, and which is about paying attention to and caring about the people who you work with and for, and the way you're interacting with them as an end in itself, because it's a better way to be and to work. And through all the things we've talked about, that will help us achieve powerful things. But so that's one thing, to just be okay with that. Now, some people will disagree with this. There'll be plenty of people who disagree fiercely with this, but that's my point of view. I think that's really important for success and for a satisfying and sustainable career. And another thing to shift gears, though, is to understand that we don't know everything, particularly when we start something, and to be comfortable and okay with that. Whether it's a project or whether it's building an organisation, whether it's developing a plan, for goodness sake, we don't know what the road ahead of us is going to look like. And so if the approach we take is, well, I better write the plan and then I better follow that plan. And we've all been there so many times with people trying to do that. It's only one possible outcome, and that's you're going to be disappointed to a larger or greater extent, because when you start, you don't know. So be comfortable with the fact that when you start, you don't know, and you've got to plan the next step. You've got to plan broadly where you want to go, and then figure it out as you go along. I'm exaggerating a bit, but you know, be comfortable with the fact that we all know we're going to figure it out as we go along. Because whether you like it or not, when you start something, you don't know what the possibilities even are going to be, let alone what the constraints and bear traps are going to be. And so your only choice at the beginning is whether you pretend that you do know, or whether you accept that you don't know and plan accordingly. And when I launch into something, I with others, I find that that's the most important thing. Take the path of accepting and acknowledging that you don't know, and then planning and proceeding according to that, rather than pretending you've got the blueprint that takes you to the end and you're going to arrive at Z after 26 letters.
Fantastic, Andrew. I wanted you to close with your final words, but I can't help to comment on that if that's okay.
Yeah,
listening to you, a couple of things that came to mind. One is this quote that I often use at AIM from Eisenhower, the American former president. Plans are nothing, planning is everything. Plans are nothing. And for me, I don't know what he meant, but my interpretation of that is that plans, they become obsolete so quickly. That's exactly what he said. But planning, the act of planning, there is value in planning because we get more clarity and so on. But I mean, accepting, continuously. But I know plans very soon, they become obsolete. And if you try to stick that plan because that was the plan and I'm sticking to that, that will lead to trouble. So I don't know if that's aligned with what you're thinking.
That is aligned with what I'm thinking, and yes, your characterization of it, saying, well, that's the plan, I'm sticking to it. Yeah, but also when you're managing other people, getting to the leadership question, if the content of your conversation is, this was the plan that we agreed 3 months ago, tell me where you're up to on it, then it's a fiction. And look, we won't get into methodologies and so on that support or undermine that, but that's the principle that I work with. But, embrace that uncertainty. Yes, you've got to know broadly where you want to get to, but embrace the uncertainty in the path and then work according to, resolving that, bearing in mind a lot of that uncertainty comes not from the technical challenges, but the way people are going to respond to it.
Just being a human on planet Earth, right? That's right.
And isn't that nice? Isn't that the way we live?
Yeah, and as a cliche as it is, no changes are only constant, no VUCA. We are in a world of volatility, uncertainty, no complexity, ambiguity, all of that. And your point on letting go of the need, or actually the need to know it all, and what I'm hearing is that the need for leaders to let go of that need to know it all. Yeah. I kind of link in my head to humility and vulnerability, which again are very, very important qualities to connect to people, because once people realize that you're humble enough to say, actually, I don't know it all. I don't have all the answers, and I'm okay to be vulnerable, which I think only comes with wisdom and experience of, being around for a while. I think people respect that a lot as well.
And I think that that gives other people the permission to acknowledge that they don't know and they don't have the answer. And so I think of a situation where, somebody who works in my team is struggling to figure out a solution to a problem or a path or something. They may feel, depending on my relationship with them, they may feel that they have to pretend they have the answer and here's what we're going to do. And on the other hand, they may feel, well, I don't know, and that they can have that conversation. And now, if I'm always pretending that I know everything, including whatever's going on in their job, then that's going to be reflected in their behaviour. And so I think that vulnerability is another leading by example, case, which is really important, because after all, in reality, we're figuring it out and we're solving problems together, whether we like to admit it or not. But that's what we're doing. So it's better if we're upfront and open so that we know what problems we're solving together.
Love that. And you're role modeling by exhibiting that vulnerability, that, being okay with not know. And what comes to mind, actually, I had a call yesterday of a prospect client for executive coaching, and they mentioned the perfectionism, the, not being okay to ask for help. And that's actually what will not happen if you have a leader that actually it's okay to admit that they know it all. People will be way more willing to, be vulnerable and said, actually, I need help, versus trying to be perfect, which is exhausting, right? From a former perfectionist myself, it is exhausting to try to be perfect, right? So yes. Andrew, it's been an absolute pleasure as always. The difference that today our chat was actually recorded and would be public so people can listen to it. But thank you so much for your time. And I hope you'd enjoy too. Any final words, any final thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience before we close?
No, I think we've covered a bit of ground. I love to chat, and we could keep going on, but maybe that's enough for today. Thank you, Nat, for your leadership in this conversation about human-centered tech leadership. You and I have been talking about it for a while, and it's something you continue to keep live in the community. And thank you for that. And thank you for today. That's been fun.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, Andrew. Thanks for tuning in and joining our discussion today. If you're learning from this podcast, please subscribe, give us a good rating, and share it with your friends. If you have any questions or suggestions about guests you'd like me to interview here in the Mindful CIO podcast, please share in the comments below. Last not least, thank you for your interest in the human side of tech leadership. See you in the next episode.